Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's bi-weekly clinic. I'm Joe. This is Hartwyn. This is your dedicated space to answer questions. Maybe you're doing one of our courses. Maybe you've already got a project on the go that you want to ask some questions about. It doesn't really matter what stage you're at. Maybe you're at the dream stage and you're still kind of thinking about some ideas, or even the planning permission, or the design, or the actual build itself. Doesn't matter what stage you're at. If you've got some questions, we're here to answer them for you. While we wait for people to join us, a few things that we've been up to. We've still been helping a little bit on a co-housing project, and we've actually got another co-housing project that's finally started to get some planning movement up in Scotland. So that's really exciting. I think co-housing projects are some of our kind of pet projects that we really like. Working on the kind of community aspect is a really interesting dynamic. So yeah, that's really good. If you've attended one of our courses, then you get 6 months access to these clinics, and we're going to speak to some of the current crop shortly. We are planning a full members area with a lot of resources as well as access to these clinics, so do keep watching or sign up to our newsletter for updates on that. In the meantime, if you can't attend in person, you can always email a question through and we will do our best to answer it at the end of the session. Okay, so let's see who we've got today. So I think we have got Paurik, who is over in Ireland, actually. I'm going to ask you to start your video and then we'll see what you've got going on.
Hi, Joe.
Hello there. Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hey, Ruth.
How are you doing?
Nice to meet you, Joe. Thanks for the invite. You got the pronunciation pretty close. It's you saw the phonetic spelling.
Yeah. Is that actually correct? Is it kind of like an Irish version of Patrick? Is it kind of, yeah? Great stuff. We'll get there. Good stuff. So you are, tell me about your project. Introduce me to your project.
It's a new build, single story, about 250 square meters. It's in a rural location, so on a site in around 3/4 of an acre. Considering timber frame, looking at foundation options. So that's currently in the planning permission process. So we haven't yet received planning permission, due in the next few weeks.
Okay, so is that the planning permission, is that just kind of outline planning permission for the site itself to say that you can build something, or have you got a design that you put through? Or
we've got a design submitted, yeah, not quite construction drawings yet, but pretty well locked in design, pending any constraints or changes by the local authority.
Sure.
But it's full planning permission, yeah. Outline planning permission is an option here also.
Right.
That would be prior to a full planning permission application, which is what we've gone straight for.
Great, brilliant. And you think your chances are pretty good in the area?
We hope so, but like you've experienced in the UK, sometimes there are some unknown I guess challenges that get thrown up, so you can never be sure. But
yeah,
fingers crossed. We hope we may. You know, it's quite common for further information to be required, or maybe design tweaks, but hopefully we'll get there. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as long as they come back with you know, this is fine in principle, but we want to see these changes, then that's the same as a yes. It just means some things need sorting out. That's really good. Oh, that sounds really promising. Yeah, excellent. I noticed that you were looking at the some of the Viking house details. Is that right? You've been kind of researching through some of his. Do you know him? The Viking house. They're a passive house contractor and builder, and they came up with the passive slab detail.
Oh, I see. Okay, I understand. There's an Irish insulation manufacturer. That's the only company name I've been going by. I believe Kingspan do it also, but the company I just learned of through a webinar. Right. It's an Irish company, so I'm quite interested in that insulated slab. For a number of I suppose environmental reasons and practical reasons.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a really good one. I mean, so the company that I'm aware of in Ireland is called Viking House. Okay. And they are a super innovative construction firm. They've been kind of working at the pointy end of construction over there. I mean, I've been watching them for about 10 years maybe, and they've been really ahead of the curve. They kind of developed their own, so they developed that passive slab detail. They were kind of the first people doing proper passive house in Ireland. They've developed a really interesting mechanical heat recovery ventilation unit that's super efficient. Yeah, they're great. So if you haven't come across them, go and look at their website, because they've got so much really interesting kind of little details and techniques that are very worth stealing. Yeah, it's really
Joe, I'll look it up. My main reservations, I guess, you're probably well aware of the obvious benefits. Reduced concrete, no need for an additional screed on top. Yep. But my main concerns, I guess, this is insulation essentially below ground level. Will it perform as well in with a small bit of moisture? I'm not expecting a significant groundwater. Rodent attacks or whatever seems to be something that comes up quite a bit from discussing with other people. Now, I fear it's just it's a bit of skepticism, or it's because it's new methodology. But they're the two things that are playing in my mind. I seem quite confident in the structural aspect of it. They were recently achieved their agrement certification in Ireland by the Irish Agrement Board here.
Yeah.
So I guess that seems to be pretty well founded. It's that they're the kind of it's just because it's new. I guess I've got those kind of concerns or queries about it.
Yeah, I mean it's relatively new, but it's quite well proven, I think, as a kind of a concept. From our perspective, the efficiency is really, really important. But one thing that we always look at is the kind of the embodied energy, the carbon that's wrapped up in it. And the EPS systems, the kind of the polystyrene systems, are quite heavy carbon and petrochemical industry stuff. So some of the insulation materials that we've been looking at for this kind of below ground stuff is like the foam glass aggregate. Yes. I don't know if you've come across that. It's like expanded, crushed, like old car windscreens and bottles. Yeah. It's kind of like popcorn, but yeah. So that's a really good one. And the really good thing about that system is it answers your kind of moisture issue, because you can create a free draining foundation that doesn't need any kind of damp proof membrane in it. And any moisture that does get in will drain out, and it can't percolate up because it's got no capillary action. Yeah. So there isn't a kind of a pre-designed detail to make a passive slab, but it is possible to do something along the same lines. They do this aggregate version, and they do a structural block version as well, so that you can actually construct your inner leaf with this insulating block, so that from your outer leaf right the way through to the other side of the outer leaf is completely insulated. So there's none of that thermal bridging from the outside to the inside, which can be very good. I'm not sure how easy it is to get over where you are. I know that a lot of what we get actually comes from Europe anyway, so you might actually find it's easier to get than for us now. Post-Brexit, we'll probably get it coming through across the Irish Channel.
I must revisit it. I had a little bit of thought given to it. Like that, it seems that the big attraction of this core or the manufacturer here, the distributor, but yeah, they've got a full suite of details.
Yes,
that it's pretty much ready to go. Certainly, I was aware of the downside of the expanded polystyrene in my mind without giving it any proper analytical view. But there's less concrete than I would use otherwise in a traditional raft foundation, which is common in the area of Ireland where I am.
Absolutely.
And you're not requiring the cementitious screed on top.
Yeah. No, those are excellent. I mean, a lot of the thing is, so I'm not familiar with how your kind of building regulations work, and sticking with stuff that the local building regs people understand and are happy with is always a very good idea. Sure. So it's often a battle between what the kind of notional best, most sustainable thing is versus what's the most efficient versus what we can get past building regs without having a big fight. Yeah. And using a known detail, like if you've got it all laid out for you by a firm that's already got all of the documentation, that's got a known detail that you can work with, that you can give to any contractor and they'll understand, that building regs are going to pass, and it's going to be super efficient. It's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the foundation dilemma, at least at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think it's a great starting point. I mean, you do much worse than starting with with that as a jumping off point. It just becomes tweaks really then at that point, to kind of see what else is available. Yeah, it's a good one. So what's about the rest of the structure?
Considering a twin stud or a twin wall timber frame on top of that. Again, leaning towards that because it's the renewable material. The company I've been engaging with so far, their detail, most commonly they're using cellulose. So blown cellulose in there. So again, a nice material to be using ecologically.
Yeah.
And it seems to be a pretty neat method to achieve your air tightness.
Yeah.
So there are a couple of the factors that really appeal to me. I'm going to have to see. I'm expecting it to be a little bit more costly maybe than in the west of Ireland. At least it's very common to have a blockwork inner and outer leaf cavity wall. So I think that's probably going to be a slightly bit more economical if I was to go that way. Yeah. But I really want the timber frame to work if I can, if it's not going to cost me so much. So the cellulose, Joe, what are your thoughts on it? It obviously it sounds great. I have to do a little bit more research on it. Mm-hmm. Is it recycled paper typically?
It is, yeah. So it's all fully recycled. I think it's been treated with borax or some other kind of anti-fire retardant material so that it's not flammable, so it's stable and safe. But yeah, it's basically it's great. So it's an end of life waste product.
Yeah,
it uses very little energy to create it, and it's a fantastic insulator. So it's a really good choice.
Thermally, Joe, they're like a 3-inch stud wall, something like that, inner and out, with maybe like a 3-inch, 4-inch cavity in between. So overall, that wall is making up, I think it's something like maybe 200 mil, something like that.
Yeah.
Vapor or airtight membrane to the inside with a batten then to create a surface void and plasterboard.
Yeah.
On the outside of that, then it's an OSB board and a vapor barrier.
Yeah.
Just from condensation perspective, would you be concerned at all that that would be a cold surface that moisture may make its way through?
I wouldn't be so worried. So one thing that I'd say is that you need to model are you going for a passive house accreditation?
No, I don't think so.
Are you aiming towards it, or are you?
Loosely speaking, I'd like it to be as high thermal performance as possible. Yeah. This wall, I think the company is stating U value of 0.14.
Right.
That passive slab is 0.1 U value.
Yeah.
And the timber frame company, if I end up going with them, there's something like 400 mil warm cell on the ceiling also. So because this is a bungalow, it's going to be quite easy to detail, I hope. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'll be getting close on a number of the measures. But it's not a major factor for me.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd say that if you can increase the cavity a bit to give yourself some extra, to up to 300 mil would be amazing. It's worth spending a little bit extra at this point because it's just future-proofing. You don't have to worry about it at the end. Yeah. In terms of a condensation risk, I would have thought that the timber frame people would model that for you to check whether there's going to be any kind of an issue. I wouldn't have thought so. I think you'd probably, because cellulose is so good insulating, you'd have to have quite a small amount before it became a problem because of the kind of difference between the inside and the outside air temperature.
It'd be quite breathable as well, right?
Sorry?
It'd be quite breathable as well.
It should be. Yeah, definitely. It does kind of pass. So it's vapor permeable as that. So the OSB will make it less vapor open because it's a much more dense material. But it is structurally very, very good. So it is technically vapor open, but you're hopefully, because are you going to be using mechanical heat recovery?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're going to be balancing the internal humidity more with moving the air in and out than by expecting the fabric of the building to respond, which is ideal. So you don't need to rely on that so much. So it will be vapor permeable enough to not cause itself any problems, which is what you need. What I would say is that you've got thermal bridging potential. So what I would do is I'd put a wood fiber board on the outside of the stud, either on top of or between the stud and the OSB, so that you're closing off. So you've got the studs and the cavity in between. There would probably be occasional noggins to create some stability between them, which means that can transfer heat from the inside to the outside. So if you close the outside with a wood fiber board, even if it's only 20 mil, then that makes a really big difference to how efficient that whole part of the fabric is. Which is really good. But the OSB on the outside, taping the joints, I definitely do that for the windproofness. What's the finish? Is it going to be timber-clad or rendered, or?
The timber-clad, whilst I like it aesthetically myself and environmentally, my wife isn't so keen on it. So we've only got a small panel of it. We've got a little bit of stone cladding, so it looks like it's going to be a rendered. So for our planning drawings, we've submitted a rendered finish.
Right.
I was considering maybe a cement board, with a render build up on top of that. The alternative then would be a blockwork outer leaf rendered. I'm a little bit on the fence about either, again, resistance to change or fear of change here. You know, a lot of people are that little bit concerned about the cement board, how well we can detail it around openings, how resilient it is to, you know, occasional contact from a car or a football when in the kids around.
I mean, from a rendering perspective, what I do is I have your wall build up, then the OSB, and then an external grade wood fiber board, and you can render straight onto that wood fiber board. So that solves the thermal bridging question and is a really great substrate to render to. And if you use like a decent quality lime render over the top of that, that's going to get really hard over time. It will be slightly more vulnerable to impact, but potentially more repairable. So, you know, it can be, you know, good in those terms. Again, this is all going to come down to local building regs and what they're happy to see. Because with a big, even though you've got fire retardant insulation and plasterboard on the inside, and you know whatever you've got going on, they are always going to be worried about spread of fire, and they might want you to clad the exterior of it with the cement board as a spread of fire mitigation risk. That's usually only a problem when you're close to other buildings, but I'm not sure how fickle they are.
It's something I'll definitely consider, because it addresses the cold bridging, the thermal bridging that you mentioned. Even though in theory, because of the twin wall, in theory you don't have that. But I'll give it some thought.
But I mean, even if you don't use it as a finish to put something to, if you just put even 20 mil, it makes a really big difference. And it doesn't have to be on the outside; it could be on the inside if that works better. You know.
If I went with a thicker, let's say a thicker wood fiber board externally and render onto it, I guess I've no cavity at all. Then no free drainage, unless you'd be thinking. I'm not familiar with the wood fiber detailing. Would that be battened to create kind of back ventilation, some form of a small cavity? Would you be thinking?
No. So you would have, if you had like a rain screen cladding on the outside, then you'd need some kind of ventilated cavity behind it in order to any penetrating moisture to go away. But if you're just rendering straight as the finish, then you don't need a ventilated cavity, because if any moisture is penetrating beyond that point, you've got bigger problems.
I'm thinking of I guess the volume and strength of wind-driven rain we have in the west, where the west of Ireland is quite exposed.
That's it. Well, that's one of the things that we'd normally advise in that situation, that you have like a double build-up. So you'd have like a rain screen of cladding or something like that to kind of mitigate that. It would be unusual to provide a cavity and then render onto that cavity. I'd say that something. Can you do any kind of landscaping around it to kind of, to provide protection, or
potentially? I certainly like to be planting trees on the site as much as is feasible. So yeah, I'll give some thought to that wood fiber board and external render. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a couple. So these the merchants that we use anyway in England, they have I think they come from Stako or various other places. So they're from Germany, and they do like a sarking one. So it's tongue and groove, and it's got a latex covering on it, which is quite useful for roofs as well. I don't think you need it in your case, because you're insulating the ceiling, not the roof.
Sure.
That's quite good, but they do a specific one that's ready for render on it, that's already kind of keyed, ready to go, that's for this purpose exactly. So if you look up external render carrying wood fiber board, you'll find the right details. And it's really good, you know. There's existing details from them to show how to tuck it into your window reveals, how to deal with sills and headers and things like that. So there's a lot of standard details for there. It's all, they build with this in Germany all the time, so it's it's a good known quantity. Yeah, cool. What else have you got going on? What are the plans?
Given some thought to heat source. Air to water is extremely common now in Ireland for new builds. And it's being retrofitted as well. But I'd always like the thought of the geothermal. I guess less fluctuation. The air to water is working that bit harder in winter because the air temperature is dropping, whereas below ground you've got more consistency.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the argument tends to be that ground source heat pump is superior because of it's so consistent. So its operational costs are very much lower, and it's very good. But you're obviously restricted by your access to land. So you've either got a very large coil to put in the ground if you may have access, or you've got a deep borehole to dig. If you
borehole is more expense again.
So it's the cost. You would spend like a third or more for the setup, but over the lifetime of it will be much more efficient. It's kind of swings and roundabouts, really. There's the articles that I've read don't really, you know, they say, well, this is really good. Oh, but this one's also really good. And they both come out and say, well, it's up to you. I'm not sure. I'm sure somebody's done a nice like 50-year projection and kind of worked it out on just a cost basis. But yeah, I've always really liked the idea of a ground source heat pump. And if you can combine it with your other groundworks, then maybe you save some costs. I think it's when you do it as an isolated, set element that it costs so much more.
Yeah, the horizontal array is certainly what I'm thinking. I'm working on a couple of quotations at the moment, but I'm expecting it to be a few percent different for the horizontal array. But the other benefit I'm hearing then, I hear it coming from the UK a lot, that with these high thermal performance buildings, overheating is something now to be considered. That seems completely alien for me in the west of Ireland, for something we'd have to consider.
Tell me about it. I'm in Lancaster, and it's just the concept of a building being too dry or too warm. It's like, what?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's an extra feature in the system that would cost me additionally again, but it has been mentioned to me that the geothermal gives you the option to bring in some cooling effect in the winter, because again, below ground is going to be cooler than above ground.
Yeah, definitely. No, it is always an option. I mean, I'd say that something that might be worth considering as you kind of move to the next stage after you get planning permission would be, even though you're not going for passive house accreditation, would be to get the initial modeling done. Because what that does is it assesses all of those things, and it will just give you a little bullet point list and kind of say, well, this is your summer overheating risk, but this is what you can do to mitigate it. And it might be as easy as reducing the size of a window, or putting a little, a sill on it, or little bits and pieces like that. It kind of gives you a little bit to work with. And it could also kind of say you're really close to hitting X, Y, and Z standards. If you just change the footprint of the walls by this much, then you're going to reach it, and then you can kind of decide what you're doing. But I think it's always better to work out ways to tweak the design of the fabric before starting to add technological elements to it to do that job for you.
We've been sensible enough on glazing now. We haven't gone massive big panels all over the place. Just
a few places. Well, this is it. You've got to, I think we've all grown up in quite old houses with small windows and poor light, and so the idea of being able to bring the light into your home is very attractive. But then all of the passive house people and the super eco warriors go, no, reduce your glazing, don't have too much light.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I not enjoy it? I'm building a house.
Sure.
Good. Well, that sounds great. That sounds like a really good, yeah, it's a really good starting points. So when are you saying you're going to get planning back?
Hopefully within the next 4 weeks or so, 4 to 5 weeks, where I think things are a little bit out of kilter with the normal routine here. Because COVID, a lot of the staff are working from home, so not quite as defined a timeline as it was.
Yeah, it's the same here still. I think even the places that are starting to open back up a bit are so backlogged, and it's just it's going to take the rest of this year to even out, I reckon. But that's good. So what's your building regulation system though? Is it, because we've got in England we have one system, in Scotland they've got another system, which is where you have to apply for and get everything signed off before you can start work. In England, it's a little bit more flexible and you can get away with it. What's yours like? Is it?
I guess it depends on the aspect of it you look at. I think it's somewhat loose here as well. We have a building control, I guess, department or authority within it, but I understand it's not nearly as stringent or as well policed as it is in England or maybe the UK, broadly speaking. The design engineer carries much of the risk and liability really in terms of sign off. They have to do site inspections for your major milestones, foundations, wall plate, roof, for their sign off in order to achieve mortgage drawdown. And then there is a final, the planning authority, the local authority, the planning department have I think it's a final completion approval, I think. In order, again, that's tied to your final mortgage drawdown. So they're interlinked, but not extremely stringent, I would say, compared to the UK.
Yeah, I mean, I think it sounds very similar to the English system. It's just that in terms of the stages and the things that they want to see, it might be just like a little bit more realistic in doing it. The Scottish one is I like it because it makes you have everything kind of signed off and agreed, and you know what's going through from a contractor's perspective. It's fantastic because you turn up with a full instruction manual and you know exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and there will be no changes because it's already been decided. Whereas in England, you can kind of get in and get started and change stuff, and you know you can be putting the foundations in and you still don't know what the structure is going to be like.
Right.
And so from a contractor, that's a nightmare, but from a client, having the flexibility of the English system could be really good. Especially if you kind of keep changing your mind.
That sounds like ours.
Yeah, that sounds good. But yeah, I mean, I think of the detailing on your project sounds like it'll be pretty straightforward for not much external engineering needed to kind of produce that stuff, and that's always good.
Yeah, that's part of the I guess the attraction or the thinking in the design. We wanted to keep it as relatively simple, hopefully make it relatively cost efficient, that we're not putting big expenses on structural stuff, as you say, or tricky features.
Yeah, great. That is brilliant. Yeah. Have you got any specific questions or things that you'd either pick my brain over or?
Well, you've dealt with a few of them there. The other one that I'm really have to get back to is waste treatment. So as part of the site characterization, and a recommendation from the engineer in that case, which was attached to the planning permissions application, we included kind of pretty standard standalone treatment plant. That's the norm here for rural housing.
Yeah,
so it's a pretty basic, I guess, anaerobic initial treatment, and then the effluent to like a polishing filter type.
Right, okay, so kind of like a soak away sort of system.
Yeah, it's close enough. Thankfully, we don't have any groundwater concerns. We're quite a depth to the water table, good draining soil in terms of, I don't know if you're aware of the p-value calculation that's done here. I don't know if there's a similar
version. Yeah.
So all very conducive to all that, but however, I'd like still to give some consideration to something a bit more ecologically friendly, environmentally friendly. Maybe like a reed bed is something that I've come across here a little bit, but
yeah,
not top priority on my list at the moment because it's, it's outside of the house.
Yeah,
but,
they do tend to be nice to have, but the good thing about those is that they're the sort of thing that can be, you can adapt and you can stick that on at the end almost.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the building regs would say about that. They like to have things signed off, I think, but yeah, they may be open to like a complete, waste treatment system that works on that way. That does need kind of a specific and careful designing because there's a lot of different plant varieties that you need to use, and some of those might be vulnerable to your aspect and location. So not everything, it's not a one size fits all. There's there's a lot of permutations to the design. It's absolutely possible. It does take quite a lot of space to do well, which may or may not be a problem. One thing that it does well with is actually having some local groundwater, some kind of runoff or something that can join so that there's water coming into the system as well as your kind of grey water and black water to then leach off to go somewhere else. So yeah, again, it would be, if it was something that you wanted to look at as your main solution, you'd probably want to be finding a dedicated installer, supplier, designer of that. It's kind of a little bit too specialist for me to just go, oh yeah, it'll be fine, stick some reeds in. But in terms of just treating the runoff and making best use of that, then it's a great idea. If you just have, you have your more basic treatment plant, and then the discharge from that, then you put through a system, it would be fantastic. It creates fantastic habitat. Any kind of wetland style habitat is one of the most diverse types of habitat that you can create, which is brilliant. So yeah, the good thing about that is that you can get in and start planting that sort of stuff up before all of the rest of the things happen. So if you've got a bit of a window while you're waiting for people to get their act together, you can kind of get in and feel like you're doing something constructive, which can be quite good as well. Sure. And you could probably find that information out just from, a couple of good articles will tell you kind of what you can use and what you can do. So it's as with any of these kind of design decisions, it's kind of picking, you're at a branching point. Do you go for treatment plant with a runoff, or do you go for the full, ecological treatment plant idea? And they'll have very different pathways on them. So yeah, that's kind of
food for thought.
Yeah, it's well worth exploring though. I think it's a really, really interesting thing to do. I would very much like to do a whole integrated ecological treatment plant myself. I've been wanting to do one of those for 20 years. But yeah, there's so many variables that you don't know about, and so many of them are site specific that it's just not been a good fit yet. One day.
Yep.
Maybe I'll live vicariously through you. Yeah, that's a good one. Great.
Well, thanks, John.
No, that's all good. That's really interesting. Thank you for bringing that to us. It's really exciting, especially getting over kind of West Island as well. Yeah, it's always somewhere that I've been meaning to visit, and I've still not managed it. It's ridiculous. I probably need all my extra passports and stuff to get there now. So
yeah, bring your raincoat.
Yeah, I'll sneak through. I'll go via mainland Europe and come in the easy way. Great. Well, that's wonderful. Well, if you have any other questions for next time, or in the meantime, just send us an email. I'll be happy to have a look at it for you with you.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, Kevin.
All right. Wonderful. So I think, who else have we got this week? We have got Kevin. Let me see if I can do.
Hello.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi, how are you doing?
I am good. How are you doing? Good. Thanks for navigating the new system. We've moved over to Zoom from Demio, which I think it seems to be a lot better. How does it feel from your end? Is it?
Yeah, it's fine, quite seamless. Yeah, so a lot of people use Zoom, I think, because it's pretty straightforward. So.
Yeah, well, we were using the original software for quite a lot of different things because it's a very complicated bit of software. But then we were only using it for this, and we're like, well, that seems silly. We're paying quite a lot of money for something that somebody else does really well want.
Yeah.
So we're trialing this one. So that's all good. So for those who haven't joined us before, can you give a précis again of your project?
Yeah, we are building 4 naturally built rammed earth holiday lodges with a natural swimming pond in Norfolk. So yeah, rammed earth is the sort of dominant part of the structure, and that's hopefully from subsoil we can excavate on site.
Yes, fantastic stuff. And you've been having some interesting work done by your architect and the some other people. How's that been going?
Yes, it's good. I've literally just got the report from the well-being specialist.
Brilliant.
So I haven't actually read it yet, but yeah, it's looking good. I think we're kind of homing in now on the sort of design review, the finished design review.
Yeah, fab.
It's quite a few. It's the same sort of content, but quite a few changes. But we think it sort of like just elevates it to where we want to be.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, this is it. Kind of aiming at that kind of the you know, impressive luxury end of the market is you know, it's very different to, well, pretty much any other project that I've been working on. But you know, as I said to you in the past, I've got some experience working in that market as a concierge at a 5-star hotel. So I'm really interested in seeing how it all kind of comes together. And it's really interesting to me that the weird, shadowy parts of my past life start to kind of intersect in a positive and useful way that I never thought would be possible. So yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I'm really excited to see what they come up with, because the starting point for the design is great. All of the kind of conceptual stuff that you've already put together is really good. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to see what their tweaks are.
Literally just before the meeting, I sent you a couple of pictures of where we are at the moment.
Oh, cool.
So still quite a bit to do, but
yeah,
gives an idea.
Brilliant. I'll have a look.
I guess the most challenging features of the new design is we have quite a contemporary sort of beam across the front of the lodge, and then a big wide open sort of glass wall type feature.
Right.
And we were trying to get this sort of monolithic rammed earth facade.
Right. Okay.
How we do the rammed earth across like a 10-meter span above the glass. I'm not quite sure. I think we're going to have to put some quite stiff steel work, because if there's any flex, then the rammed earth will crack.
Yeah, that's a big span, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that possibly the way to do it would be to have some steel in there. You could possibly do a big, like, engineered glulam style beam as the main structural support, but with a kind of a steel flange that projects out of the front, that carries the rammed earth. I'm thinking
it's got to sit on the flange rather than be kind of solidly.
Yeah, you could do that. And if you could probably build it so rather than it being one clear panel, you could do it in like 3 or 4 sort of panels, and make it, you know,
not the effect we were trying to do.
You want one monolithic,
just to make it a bit more interesting.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get, I mean, there should be possible to kind of see. The problem is obviously is you're looking at mixing 3 different materials. You've got like potential a timber main kind of structural element, a steel non-structural but supporting element, and then the rammed earth facade, all of which will have different thermal expansion properties. And it's like you say, it's a really long bit. So maybe there's a way to isolate the rammed earth from the steel. Maybe it's as simple as just putting a membrane between the 2 things so that it's sitting on a shelf, but that they can kind of move independently in the same way.
I'm thinking as you as you build up the rammed earth wall, it's going to get heavier, and the beam is going to deflect more.
Yeah.
And you'll be cracking before you've even finished the wall.
Well, you could. You don't need to put all of the weight on the base plate. You could build supports projecting out of the beam to carry it, so that almost like fingers, so that you build the wall, the rammed earth onto it, so that it's supported by the beam behind it as well.
Yeah.
So that there's less weight transferred. I'm not quite sure how you'd model that. There might not be anything consistent enough to do it. Yeah, or just to have because if the rammed earth's not doing anything other than continuing the feel and the look of the place, it's there for an aesthetic.
It's not really doing
just do a thin bit.
Wouldn't that make it more susceptible to crack?
Potentially, but maybe that's the bit that you pay more attention to stabilizing for that reason, to kind of bind it together, get a bit of lime in there to do that. Yeah, well done. That's a quirky one.
Yeah, that'd be challenging.
yeah. 10 meters.
Yeah. Right across the front.
That's really big.
It looks really good, but you just got to make it happen.
There's probably a sweet spot, I'd have said, because you don't need to go for like a 200 mil. I mean, maybe reducing it to the 100 mil and paying really close attention to the to any kind of fiber or anything that we're putting into it to kind of create that kind of tensile strength. Yeah. Such a long span.
But you do see some buildings, some of the bigger buildings, cemeteries or whatever. Some of those have got quite big openings. I haven't checked to see if there's any that big. But I wonder if they've got a massive, like, reinforced concrete sort of lintel or something behind them or something.
Yeah, there must be.
But we don't want to add like 10 tons of bloody concrete or something. So
no.
Well, anyway, it's it's kind of early days really. I need to give it some thought.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it's difficult because there's going to be the rammed earth aesthetic is so distinctive. Being able to give those kind of defined ripples and layers and pigmentation and things that you can do with it, that it really does stand out, and that obviously a very boring consistent rammed earth wall you could mimic with clay plaster, but that's not what we're going for.
No.
We want the big ripple definition.
I mean, perhaps another way you could prefabricate, pre-do the rammed wall and then lift it in place, but again, that's not really what we want. Anyway, we'll give it some thought.
Yeah. Is there no possibility of intermediate structural support to take the flex out?
No, I think that would ruin it.
That's one of the main things, is this big clear span.
Yeah.
See, this is the problem when you involve architects. You have pretty ideas, and then suddenly you're going to pay 10 grand for this. No, it's worth it.
Well, at the end of the day, as you say, if we really can't make it work, then we'll make it out of individual panels. And I think there's probably a way to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
So we'll see.
Or maybe this is something we can mock one up in your barn when you're doing the kind of greenhouse element, and just see.
Oh, that's a thought. Yeah.
Just kind of, because all you need is like a big long bit of steel or something to put it on, and stick it on a couple of car tires or something, one at each end, and then build it up and leave it for 6 months and see what happens. Possibly. It's quite a gamble though, isn't it? Because it's one of those things where you build it and it's fine for the first year, and then you have one particularly heavily raining spring and then a very, very dry summer, and then everything kind of goes.
Well, yeah, I think it would definitely have to be stabilised. But the other thing, of course, is is the wind load, because it's going to be susceptible to wind sort of stuck up there. So
that's interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe Bath will know. Bath, the university, did a really big study on rammed earth and assessment of constructing with rammed earth. There's a really lovely paper, what's it called? A review of rammed earth construction. And that was, it's quite old, it's from 2003, and it was for the DTI.
Oh, yeah.
So it was basically a kind of feasibility study on how it could be used to integrate into our housing stock. Is it feasible to use? And it's got some really interesting things. It's a 118-page document with all kinds of interesting bits and pieces in it.
I might have it downloaded. I've downloaded.
Yeah, probably. It's
but,
one of those things that I've downloaded about 6 times over the last 15 years and gone, oh, I'm going to read that in full one day. Not so far. I'll read the executive summary. Thank you very much. But yeah, it's really in depth, and maybe because you know what, other engineers and scientists are like, they love talking about their pet subjects. Maybe we can find the writers of it and send them a tweet saying, "Dear Peter Walker, what are your thoughts on 10-meter spans of rammed earth suspended in the middle of the air in Norfolk?" Yeah. There's loads of people involved in this, and it's really good. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Simmons Mills were involved with it. Great. Simmons Mills Architects are a great, very progressive architecture firm that we would love one day to work with. They're really good. And they were involved. They were on a steering group for it.
Who was that?
Simmons Mills.
Oh, okay.
Architects and builders. Yeah, they do some good stuff.
Okay.
But yeah, they go into the national rammed earth codes because other countries have got building codes for these things because they're progressive.
Yeah, we still haven't here, have we? I don't know.
We've barely got building codes for conventional building, not worthwhile ones. Yeah. Great. Cool. That sounds really interesting. A tricksy problem to solve, but they're the fun ones. I'm sure there'll be a way around it. Yeah. Are there any other kind of major changes to it?
Not really. So it's on the same footprint. We've kind of like moved things around a bit,
right?
But in essence, it's the same thing. But yeah, just I think works a lot better now. So
yeah, brilliant. Well, that's great.
So yeah, I've been focusing on that really. I haven't. So I've been a bit quiet in terms of talking to you.
That's fine.
A couple of weeks.
Yeah, these projects have their own momentum and kind of things. You have to deal with.
Sort of ebb and flow in different areas, don't they?
Yeah.
So yeah, I've just got so much to do on so many different fronts that I just want to make sense of it. Yeah, I didn't really have anything specific to bring up apart from that, really.
Cool.
I just thought I'd listen in to see what other people were doing.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to get the kind of the Irish contingent coming through the door. Yeah, that's really interesting. I feel a bit bad because I've genned up on some of the Welsh peculiarities of building regs and planning and the Scottish stuff because we've done quite a lot of work in Scotland already. But yeah, I've neglected our Irish brethren and not done it. So I should probably have a look at that because that would give me a justifiable excuse to go and visit.
So you've got another project in Norfolk, haven't you?
Yeah, so we've got one just outside Norwich that we're looking at the moment, which is a nice garden studio and workshop. It's permitted development, so we've been able to skirt planning permission, which is wonderful, and that's we're just about to start doing the kind of building regs and the stuff for that.
Oh, okay. I was going to say if you come over for that project, then obviously it makes sense for you to pop in and.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, definitely. I was going to get in touch about that because I'm needing to make a visit over in the next kind of week or two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it'd be really good to do that. We've also got the last project that we built in 2019, before the last year of chaos, which is Suffolk. So it's just around the corner. And I need to kind of pop in and check how that's going, because it's always really interesting to see one of our buildings, you know, after a year or 18 months has passed, to see how it settled, yeah, basically, you know, you're always kind of losing sleep. It's like sending.
What construction was that one?
Sorry?
What construction was that one?
That's a timber frame, straw bale infill,
okay.
with clay plaster, lime, bit of lime render, and some nice green larch cladding. Yeah, it's really pretty, but it's also really interesting for us to see, apart from the, you know, being able to breathe a sigh of relief that we're competent builders and can see this wonderful structure that's still there, because, you know, you always second guess yourself. So when that's kind of sat there and it's behaving exactly as it's planned, and the, you know, everybody's really happy with its performance, just being able to see it as something different to what you built, I don't know, giving that gap between building something and then seeing it over a year or so, it sits much better into the land, because things have grown back, because it's obviously quite scarred, and it feels weird when you've, you know, there wasn't a building there and now there's a building, and you can tell, you know, it's like this big fresh thing, and yeah, it doesn't kind of feel like any other relationship with a building. So going away and coming back to it changes your perceptions of it, and I think that's from a personal perspective, it's almost like, as the Americans would say, gives you some closure on it, because it's like, oh yeah, this is a thing. It's not just this notional thing that I've constructed that I still don't trust that I constructed. It's like, yeah, there it is. Makes it more tangible. So it's yeah, it's really nice being able to go back and see these things in use, and yeah, and tut over the things that people have done to them as well. No judgment. I'll not judge anything that you do, Kevin. Obviously, you'll be spared.
Well,
the silent Hartwyn.
We just want to create the best project we can. So I'm certainly
exactly
open to
yeah.
Well, don't know if criticism's the right word, but
no,
open to discussion on.
Yeah. No, it's all good. It's just I had to come to the realization that I can't clone me and have me doing everything out there, and because of that, I need to allow other people to have opinions.
So yeah, well, we are going to tidy up this sort of design review, and then I will have to put that into planning as
get some amendments done.
Amendments. Is that an easy process in your experience, or are they?
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you're not changing too much, you know, what you're doing is you're not changing the fabric choices, you're not changing the footprint or the aspect of them. What you're doing is you're tweaking the layout, and you're tweaking what the facade is going to look like in some dimensions. So those are really easy things that don't mean they have to completely reconsider the whole project. It's more a case of them just going back over their kind of check boxes and going, do any of these things trigger a problem? And they'll just be like, no, that's all fine. So there's no reason for them to object to any of these changes.
No, I don't think we've been quite mindful of not sort of changing anything too material to it. So
yeah, no, it's at this stage, kind of revisions to it are essentially busy work to tick boxes at this point. If you fundamentally change what the building looks like and how it sits in the environment, then that's when you start running into problems, because they have to essentially do a whole new appraisal of the site. But you're not doing that, so I would suspect you'll be completely fine. I've no idea how quick it will be, because like I said, we were talking with Patrick before, it's still problematic timescale wise. But you know, there's plenty of other stuff. I would think it's probably safe to assume that they're going to pass everything off, so you can carry on with the rest of the development in the background, rather than having to wait like you do normally for planning permission to know whether you're going to get a yes or a no, because it's often not worth investing the next bit of money developing the project until you have that binary go for the project. But you've already got that. Unlikely that that's going to change, so you can kind of move forward with the other bits and pieces while that's happening. So if it takes a bit longer than usual, it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
Yeah. Great stuff.
Yeah, I don't think I've really got anything else. My mind's been so full of other stuff. I haven't really sort of given much thought to questions or anything.
That's all right. That's fine. It's
but I'll probably send you some stuff, some updates over the next week, and then we can have another chat perhaps.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thanks very much for those updates. I look forward to seeing the new bits and pieces.
Okay.
Great. Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Good to see you. Bye now.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, Patrick. We'll speak to you again, maybe.
All the best. Take care.
Take care. Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody, for this week. That was really good. We don't have any email questions. So if you do have any for next time, do email them through to contact@hartwyn.co.uk, or you can send us a message on Facebook or on Twitter. Usually quite active on Twitter at the moment, so you can catch us there, and do join in the conversations that we're having. There's some really interesting stuff going on at the moment, especially over, there's a lot of debates over net zero carbon, which is really cooking my goose. But there's been a fantastic project report released today, which I'm going to pour through because it's a proper assessment of net zero commitments globally. And that breaks down what people are, what governments and policymakers are deciding to do to get to net zero carbon, and what those commitments actually look like and how effective they are, which is really good. So while I've had an extremely strong opinion of the drive for net zero carbon, it's not been as data-led as I would like. So I'm going to read that report, and there will be probably a blog or two about that coming up soon. So I think that is all we've got time for this week. Thank you to all of our contributors. I hope it was useful for them and for anybody watching. If you think that these clinics would be of value to you, we really do recommend doing the self-build primer, which is one of our courses that we've got online. It answers lots of questions up front, and it lays the groundwork for you to really make the most of these live sessions. Knowing what questions to ask to get the information you need is half the battle, and that's why we made the webinar and the self-build primer, just to kind of give you a bit of coaching and to get you in the right frame of mind to ask the right questions. If the course isn't right for you, maybe you're not at the stage of your build yet or your project, then you can always email or tweet that question to us, and we'll answer it at the end. And do keep watching for announcements as we release new content, new resources, and new ways to get access. And if you've got any suggestions, please do let us know how we can help. Thanks very much, everyone. We'll see you next week.